Honourable Carmel Cepoloni, Deputy Prime Minister, Chris Luxon, Leader of National Party, and we're waiting for David Seymour. He'll turn up. He's on his way, I'm told. Honourable James Shaw, co-leader of the Green Party, ministers, members of Parliament, and election candidates. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I am David Tai, the new chairman of Auckland Chinese Community Centre. On behalf of the Auckland Chinese Community Centre, I wish to welcome everyone to our 2023 General Election Forum. Special welcome goes to, of course, our four speakers who have come to inform all our Auckland Chinese community of what their parties will do after, if they should become the party, if their party became the government. Our Auckland Chinese Community Centre was established in the 1960s by the earlier Cantonese-speaking Chinese migrants to help members maintain their culture and to adapt to their new country. We believe voting at a general election is a very important matter, and our members need to be properly informed of the major political parties' policies before voting. For this reason, we have organised this event to give not only our members but also all the rest of Auckland Chinese community the opportunity to be properly informed. We are grateful to all our speakers for coming. We really appreciate them for including this event in their very busy election schedule. Now, before we start the forum, I wish to introduce our Deputy Chair, David Wong, who will set some housekeeping rules and rules that govern this running of the forum. So please welcome David Wong.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Auckland Chinese Community Centre Electoral Forum 2023. Our toilets are at the back, where I'm pointing to my left, and should there be a fire, we could all please follow the exit signs straight out. So, as mentioned, it's a good crowd to see you here today. We're 5 weeks away from Election Day, and we have many issues facing our New Zealand voters. I welcome Carmel Cepoloni, the Deputy Prime Minister representing the Labour Party, Christopher Luxon, Leader of the Opposition and representing the National Party, David Seymour, Leader of the ACT Party and member of Epsom, and he's following Chinese time because he's not here yet, and James Shaw, co-leader of the Greens Party. We appreciate your attendance today, and we understand your busy schedules, but also appreciate your reaching out to our wider Chinese community. The outline agenda today is as follows. The first 30 to 40 minutes will be allocated to the leaders to overview their party policies and highlight where they will take New Zealand if they were to govern over the next 3 years. Each leader will be given 10 minutes to overview their policies. The timekeeper will ring at the 8th minute, signalling that you have 2 minutes to summarise and finish. The second part of the afternoon will be the moderator questions from myself. This will cover in more detail 7 or so more topics covering the cost of living, inflation, housing, crime, health and education. These must be answered within 2 minutes. The third section of the agenda, we will open up to questions from the floor, again limited to 2 minutes. And thereafter, we hope you can join us for an afternoon tea. So, going to our first topic, our first speaker, we have the Deputy Prime Minister Carmel, if you could please welcome Carmel Siahalini.
Daja hao. Daiga hao. Kia ora koutou. It is such a privilege to be here today with our Auckland Chinese community. Can I acknowledge each and every one of you for coming out today to engage in politics, to meet us and to ask questions about things that are important to you. I'd like to start by extending the warm greetings from the Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, who was unable to be here today. He's currently in Christchurch, but he did ask me to pass on his regards and to reiterate the importance and value of the contribution that our Chinese community makes here in Aotearoa. He also asked me to mention the success of his recent trade mission and his appreciation for the warm way in which he was received by the President of China and other Chinese leaders. He did say that he looks forward to meeting as many of you as possible over the course of the next 5 weeks in the campaign and beyond. Can I acknowledge you, David Tai and David Wong of the Chinese Community Centre, and everyone else who has helped to organise today. There are a few of my parliamentary and candidate colleagues in the room today. I saw the Honourable David Parker. Thank you for coming along, David Parker. Le Maunga Lydia Sorsene, who's a candidate for Māngere for Labour. Narissa Henry, who is the Labour candidate for Pakuranga, and I believe Camilla Bellich is coming shortly. And I also want to acknowledge that currently there is only one Chinese Member of Parliament, and that happens to be a member of the very diverse Labour caucus, my good friend and colleague Naisi Chen. So acknowledging you, Naisi. Can I acknowledge all the other party representatives that are here in the room? It does feel very good not to have to be in Parliament and be able to be here to talk with all of you about the upcoming election and Labour's vision for New Zealand. We head into this election campaign very proud of our track record, very realistic about the challenges before us, and incredibly optimistic about New Zealand's future. After a very difficult 3 years, our economy is turning the corner. Inflation is coming down and wages are growing, but it hasn't been easy. I acknowledge the impact that the pandemic and weather events have had on all communities here in Aotearoa, including our Chinese community. I know that many of our Chinese business people were in need of having to access supports during COVID, and some needed support during the weather events as well. I think it's important to mention that when the floods hit Auckland, many of the first people that were impacted by flooding in different parts of Auckland were actually from our ethnic communities. I was one of the first that went to the Kelston Evacuation Centre and saw many of those people come through the doors having been flooded out of their homes, and some of them were from our Chinese community. I just want to recognise how difficult it is for our ethnic communities, including our Chinese community, when not only are you facing a natural disaster of that nature, but also when there are other challenges like having English as a second language. One example of a person from your community that I worked with was a woman who, along with her family, had left her home having been flooded up to here, having lost everything. After speaking with her, I found out that she actually was getting treatment for breast cancer and had lost her medication during that time, so we connected her up with the health services to get access to that. And she also struggled with some other challenges, like her car was getting fixed and she had a loan car and she was scared that they wouldn't take the rationale for having lost the loan car, and she was scared of how she was going to explain that. It didn't take much for me as an elected rep just to ring the mechanics and sort that out for her. But that is an example of how difficult it can be for our ethnic communities when we're faced with natural disasters of that nature. But after a tough start to the year, I have to say, with the cyclone and floods, there are very good signs that the economy is growing again. We've reconnected with the world and our exports are increasing year on year. And I want to acknowledge our relationship with China here. It is a mature and comprehensive one. The free trade agreement with China was first signed in 2008 under a Helen Clark-led government, when bilateral trade had already reached $8 billion. Bilateral trade has since soared to an impressive $40.3 billion. The value of New Zealand exports to China alone stands at a staggering $21.4 billion. We've had 18% growth over the past 2 years despite the challenging global environment. This highlights the resilience and strength of our economic ties. China is New Zealand's top trading partner globally, as well as our largest total export market. And when our New Zealand businesses are able to trade internationally, our businesses thrive and New Zealanders have jobs. That's probably a good segue into employment, actually. We have currently record or near record low unemployment, more New Zealanders in work than ever before, and so many opportunities ahead of us. After years of neglect, we're rebuilding the country's infrastructure with record investments in road maintenance, rail, new and rebuilt classrooms, schools and hospitals, and yes, the biggest public housing build program since the 1950s. We're lifting children out of poverty. Approximately 77,000 children have been lifted under poverty under this government. We're tackling climate change by reducing our carbon emissions 3 years in a row, and I do acknowledge that the co-leader of the Green Party has also been our very effective climate change minister. And we're supporting our businesses to grow and create new jobs. We're making so much progress, and what we believe is that now is not the time to turn back to the failed approach of cuts and neglect that created all of the problems in the first place. I want to focus on something we're all feeling right now, and that is the cost of living. The two most important things we can do to help Kiwi families deal with the cost of living is bring down inflation and grow wages. Getting inflation under control means interest rates fall and real wage growth helps families right now and in the long term too. On inflation, we're starting to win that battle. While there's still a way to go, inflation will fall over the coming year, and those are the forecasts that we've been given. With economic conditions tightening, as a government, we've trimmed back spending to ensure we live within our means and aren't contributing to inflation. Our focus has been on keeping people in work while increasing incomes. With prices and mortgages going up, I know it doesn't feel like it, but average wage increases have outstripped inflation while we've been government. Since the spike in cost of living, we've delivered targeted support to families to help ease the pain. We invested close to $2 billion over 18 months to buffer the spike in oil prices following the invasion of Ukraine, saving families money every time they filled up the car. We also introduced half-price public transport fares, something we're carrying on for 13 to 24-year-olds, and have made it free for children, delivering a saving of around $30 per week for a family with 2 children, something unfortunately National wants to take away now. Public transport users are unquestionably worse off under National's sneaky tax cuts, which means families with kids would need to stump up the full fare again. We've continued to support older New Zealanders by lifting super payments for a couple by $326 per fortnight since we took office. But Labour's commitment to our seniors is not matched by the coalition of cuts who are lining up to mess with Kiwi superannuation again. I'm not sure if you've seen this, but they intend to lift the age of eligibility to 67. Labour will not lift the retirement age, and we will protect KiwiSaver. A re-elected Labour government will take GST off fruit and vegetables to ease the cost at the supermarket and help healthier choices become more accessible for everyone. We've committed to free dental care for under 30s. As we move forward, we want to see that universally. This week we've also committed to growing our police force to a historic level, adding another 300 police on top of the 1,800 we've delivered so far. In tough times and when the opposition has a bit of a negative outlook, it's easy to fall into pessimism. But I choose hope and optimism. We're about bringing New Zealanders together because I know we're at our best when we are united. To everyone in this room, I want you to know that the Labour Party has been upfront and clear about our plans, including who we would and wouldn't go into coalition with. I think everyone knows it wouldn't be natural for us to have a relationship with National or ACT, but we've also ruled out going with New Zealand first. That isn't the case with all political parties. I wish you well and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Carmel, and there'll be opportunity to elaborate on your policies when we go into the detailed questions. Now it's a great opportunity to introduce the Leader of the Opposition, Christopher Luxon, but just before, Chris, you come up, we just need to acknowledge and welcome David Seymour, who's come in late, probably just come back from a yum cha. But please welcome Christopher Luxon. Thank you.
Well, ni hao, dajao hao, washi Chris Luxon. It is good to see you all and good to be here. Can I just say before I begin a big thank you to David and for the leadership role that you play here at the Chinese community. Can I also acknowledge David Wong and importantly Kai Lui and thank him for his many years of great service, Kai. We appreciate you and what you've done. And importantly, from my side, I just want to acknowledge the other political leaders that are here. It's good to be with you as well and good to see you. And from our own National Party, we have our President Sylvia Wood, who's here with us, Melissa Lee, Nancy Liu. We also have Rosemary Burke, we have Agnes Lohene, and we have Carlos Chung with us as well. So I want to say welcome to all of you and thank you for stepping up into the space of public service. We appreciate what you're doing. But most importantly, can I say thank you to all of you for the immense and valuable contributions that you have made to New Zealand and continue to make to New Zealand. You are a great source of inspiration for so many of us because you in many cases have left your homeland, you've left your languages, you've left your culture, you've come to New Zealand. We see how incredibly hard you work in order to get ahead for yourself and for your family and for your communities, and we find that incredibly inspiring. So it is good that you are here ready to engage with the political process. Now look, I've been in politics for just over 2 years, and I have to tell you, I have two emotions. The first is that this is without doubt the best country on planet Earth, and it has huge amounts of potential before it. When you think about the smart, talented, creative, determined people that we have that can foot it with the very best in the world, when you think about us being bang smack in the middle of the Asia-Pacific region, the fastest growing part of the globe, and when you think about us being part of a liberal democracy where we have the rule of law, respect for human rights and fairness at the heart of our society, all of those conditions say to us that there is no reason why we shouldn't do exceptionally well in the world together in the coming years and decades. The second emotion 2 years in is that I feel that we are totally, utterly, completely going in the wrong direction. And that if we were really honest with ourselves and took a step back, we would say that we're not realising that potential. We're not solving the big problems and challenges that we have, and we certainly aren't maximising the opportunities that are in front of us. And a big part of it is over the last 6 years we've had a government, frankly, that has taken us off track. It has had economic mismanagement on a scale we haven't seen before. It has spent more, up 80%, and yet we don't have an 80% improvement in outcomes. It has taxed more, and yet it's also borrowed more. Borrowing has gone from $5 billion to $73 billion. It is now $6 billion to service the debt that we now owe the rest of the world. It's a government that's believed in centralisation and control, and it's a government, I think, that's also practiced and pushed identity politics in New Zealand. So the question is, that's the reality of where we are. And I say that up front because it's important that we are going to turn this country around, we're going to get it back on track and we're going to get it sorted. And to do that, you've got to acknowledge the reality and then have hope, not just in some kumbaya sense, but hope because you've got a better plan to be able to take the country forward. So on October the 15th, in a national-led government, we're going to focus on three things. And the first thing that we have to do is we have to fix and rebuild this economy to reduce the cost of living crisis. And let's be clear, we have got here because of a government that has spent. It's also pushed up asset prices, it's pushed up inflation, that has led to higher interest rates, that has now put New Zealand into a recession, the only country in the Asia-Pacific region in a recession, and that creates a risk of rising unemployment. And so what we need to do is tackle the underlying causes of inflation. Stop passing costs on to businesses and farmers that lead to higher prices and therefore more inflation. Think about actually how we unblock the blockages in our economy that are stopping our companies from growing quickly. And that's about immigration settings, but it's also about removing all the red tape that we see across this government. We have to go through $137 billion worth of government spending and stop the dumb and stupid and wasteful stuff, of which there is an awful lot of it going on. Then we need to be able to give you tax relief, hard-working New Zealanders, low and middle income New Zealanders, the squeezed middle, those folk that are waking up each morning, getting their kids to school, paying their taxes, and despite how hard they work, they still can't get ahead because interest rates are high, rents are high, food are high, fuel's high, everything's going up and they can't keep up with that increase in prices. And so we need to be able to give them some relief, and that's what we announced last week. We said that if you're an average family on an average household income with young kids, you get up to $250 a fortnight in tax relief. So you can spend and save that money as you see fit, because we trust you with your money much more than we trust this government to spend it or waste it on your behalf. And then we've got to get the Reserve Bank to get inflation back under 3%. So that's job number one. If we can do that, we can reduce a lot of the economic pain and suffering that people are dealing with, if we can get to the underlying causes of inflation and tackle that and deal with it properly. The second thing we've got to do, restore law and order and personal responsibility, because crime is out of control in this country. And the only target this government has had has been a reduction in the prison population, and all of us here would be good with that if we'd actually had a reduction in the crime as a result. But violent crime's up over 30%, retail crime's up 100%, gang membership's up 70%. There are now 9 gang members for every 10 police officers in New Zealand, and we have a ram raid happening at least twice a day. And so we get to say that is unacceptable. We don't have to accept that. We don't have to accept that every 6 months it gets more frequent, more gratuitous, more violent. We can do something different about that. So we're going to back the police, we're going to tackle the gangs. That means no gang patches in public places, give the police the dispersal powers that they can to break them up, make sure they've got the consorting powers to break them up from planning criminal activity, give them firearm prohibition orders and therefore warrantless search powers to go after the source of illegal guns. And if you're a gang member, I'm sorry, it's an aggravating factor in your sentencing. Then we need to have serious consequences for serious young offenders, and that does mean military academies with community organisations embedded in them to work with those young people to turn their lives around, but to teach them discipline and responsibility and accountability and all of that good stuff. And then we want stronger sentencing. We're going to discount the amount of sentences that judges can discount sentences by, put some limits around that as a result. Third thing we've got to do, final thing we've got to do, is make sure we deliver better health and education. Because that is without doubt the saddest thing that I have experienced since coming to politics in the last 2 and a bit years. I am a kid whose parents left school at 15 and 16. I am the first person in my family ever to go to university, and I felt a Kiwi education got me from a set of circumstances to a much better set of circumstances because of that. And I want that for every Kiwi kid, that they should be able to realise their potential, and education is one of the ways in which they get to do that. But here's the deal. 40% of our kids don't go to school regularly today. 75,000 of them are chronically absent from school. Half our kids arrive at high school not ready to go or at the standard they need to be at. This year, half our 15-year-olds failed the most basic maths, reading and writing test. And when I went to school, we were in the top 10 countries on maths, reading and science in the world, and now we're well out of the top 10 on any of those things. So we have to fix that, because that's going to be an economic crisis. How do our kids access higher paying jobs if they can't get educated to be able to access those jobs? It's a social crisis, because those that actually are in more challenged areas and neighbourhoods don't do nearly as well because their school's not set up to succeed for them as much as other schools. So we have to deal with that. And that means teach the basics really brilliantly. An hour of maths, an hour of reading, an hour of writing each and every day for primary and intermediate age kids. A well-defined curriculum, year by year, laid out, defined as to what we teach, to who, by when. And also making sure we have regular assessments as a result along the way, so we know the progress that our kids are making and the support that they might need to do to get caught up. So long story short, we have a fantastic country. Do not give up hope on New Zealand or New Zealanders. We've had a broken government, but we do not have a broken country. But we now do need to go to work, and we need to get the show sorted. We need to get it back on the road. We need to get some positivity, some ambition, some aspiration, some can-do back into the country, and that's what we're going to do on October the 15th with all of your help. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris, for sharing your insights. Now I'd like to call upon the leader of the ACT Party, David Seymour.
Ni hao, 大家好，我这里是 David Seymour， 我是行动党党魁。Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much to my old friend, long-standing friend, Kai Louis. It's good to see you here, and thank you everyone that's come along, my fellow parliamentary leaders and fellow MPs and candidates. It's great to see you all here. Most of all, thank you everybody who's come out to participate in our democracy and hear what's on offer when you decide who to give your vote to in just a few weeks now. Thank you for being here. I want to just say something about New Zealand that I think is at the core of what our country is. You see, there's so many different people, so many different walks of life, so many different backgrounds, but every single New Zealander has one thing in common, and it may be the only thing they have in common. We are children of pioneers. If I know just one thing about you as a New Zealander, I know that you or your ancestors have travelled further to give their kids a better tomorrow than anyone else in history. Now, some people say, I don't believe what politicians say, but you can check this one for yourself. Have a look at the map of the world and see how far people have moved to live in New Zealand. And have a look again, you'll see that Australians, they moved nearly as far, but we also know some of them didn't move quite so voluntarily as us either. You see, that's what makes us special as New Zealanders. We voluntarily moved out here for a better tomorrow. And the values of the ACT Party are the simple values that you can make a difference in your own life. When you make an effort, there should be reward. And you shouldn't have your reward stolen. And when I say having your reward stolen, sure, I mean some kid driving their car through the shop window to steal stuff that you or someone in your community may have worked hard to build up. Sure, I mean burglaries. Sure, I mean gangs dealing drugs and damaging our society. But I also mean another gang that steals more than anyone. That's called the IRD. And they're run by a big gangster called Grant Robertson, who is taking more money than any other gang you've heard of. And so the ACT Party says that you should be able to make a difference in your own life. To come to this country, work hard, be able to afford a home, to build a business, to build a family, and end up making tomorrow better than today through your own efforts. And not only should you be safe from crime, both criminals in Wellington and criminals and gangs around here, you should be safe from discrimination based on who you are. Because see, we all come from different backgrounds. And the ACT Party stands for universal human rights. We reject the idea that you should find yourself with different political rights, with a different role in this society based on who your ancestors were. When we read the Treaty of Waitangi, our nation's founding document, we take seriously where it says that we all have ngā tikanga katoa ri te tahi, the same rights and duties, whether you have been here for 15 generations or just one. You have an equal place in this society when it comes to local government or healthcare or education or anything else. When you look across ACT's policies, you will see our values shine through. That simple idea that each of us should be able to make a difference in our own lives without being dragged down for who we are, without having our stuff stolen by any kind of gang, and yet to be able to stand up and be proud of what we achieve. We should be proud of business. People don't say this enough. We need political leaders who are prepared to stand up and say that success is good. Business is a force for good. When people come together, some people are investors who have savings. Some people are entrepreneurs who have ideas. Some people are workers who have time and talents. Other people are customers who have needs. And when investors and entrepreneurs and workers and customers come together and trade value for value to get stronger together, that's a beautiful form of human cooperation. We need to hear it more, that business is a force for good. Prosperity is a force for good. Those are the values that underpin the ACT Party, that simple idea that we all moved out here to make a difference in our own lives and the lives of those that we care about. So what does that mean practically? It means we stop government waste. This government is wasting too much money, and that means we're paying more taxes. Our kids will pay more taxes to make up for the $121 billion that Grant Robertson has borrowed in 6 years with nothing to show for it. We need to stop the government spending and wasting so much money, and our alternative budget shows how we'd spend $9 billion a year less without touching a single teacher, firefighter, police officer, nurse or doctor, or anyone that anyone in the real world would actually notice. That is how much bureaucratic waste there is in Wellington. And with that saved money, we'd reduce your taxes so someone on the average wage would be $2,000 a year better off, so they've got some money to deal with the price rises that they already face. We're talking about cutting waste and cutting taxes. The Labour Party say that me and Chris Luxon are the coalition of cuts. I say absolutely. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be cut. And it's the same thing with crime. That needs to be cut too. You know, we have tried an experiment in this country of letting out criminals to see if they'd be kind to us. If only we're kind to criminals, maybe they'll be kind back. Well, I could have told the government how this experiment would end. You let criminals out of jail, guess what you get? More crime. And unfortunately, this hasn't been funny for most people, and for some people it has been absolutely tragic. So we're going to build more jail capacity. It's in our alternative budget. We're going to change the Sentencing Act. We're going to say to the judges, you must think about the victim and you must think about the safety of the community before you put someone out on home detention where they keep committing more crime and tying up police resources. People that committed domestic violence should not be getting put out in home detention when they committed the crime in the home. People try and make these things sound complicated, but they're actually very simple, and they're actually simply about values. The simple idea that no matter who you are, you have a right to make a difference in your own life. And if that sounds like you, I hope you'll give your party vote to ACT. If you live in the Epsom electorate, I hope that you'll give your electorate vote to me to continue being your local MP. And if you live in the Tamaki electorate, I hope that you will vote for a change for the better with your electorate vote to make Brooke Van Velden a spokesperson and an MP for the Tamaki community that you can be proud of. I look forward to hearing the rest of the questions that people will have today. I think this is going to be a very fun debate. It's going to be a fun election, and at the end of it, we won't just be changing the management but continuing the direction. We will have a mandate for real change, not just to get back on track because we know where that track led, but to turn this country around and make it work again for those people who want nothing more than the simple opportunity to make a difference in their own lives and the lives of those they care about, no matter who they may be. Thank you very much, Cecil.
Thank you, David, for sharing your insights on the ACT Party. I don't think I've seen a gang patch of IRD written on it, and nor do they ride that many Harleys at the IRD, but thanks for sharing that. Okay, the next speaker is the co-leader of the Greens, James Shaw. Please welcome.
Ni hao, kia ora koutou, good afternoon. Thank you for being here and thank you for the opportunity to address you. I also want to extend my thanks to the Auckland Chinese Community Centre for hosting us, for pulling this together and for ensuring that there's such a good crowd here as well. My name is James Shaw. I am the co-leader of the Green Party of Aotearoa New Zealand. I'm also a minister in the current government, and I was a minister in the previous Labour-led government as well from 2017. So I have some experience there. Prior to entering politics, I was a management consultant, primarily based in London, where I did most of my work was in the financial services sector, given that it was London. I just wanted to start off by acknowledging that there will be many people in the room who were severely affected by the floods in Anniversary Day earlier this year, and who will have friends and family whose lives are still disrupted by the fact that your homes were damaged or destroyed and unable to be moved back into in some way. Those floods, of course, were exacerbated by the changing climate and the fact that our oceans are warmer than they have been at any time in recorded history, which leads to greater evaporation from the oceans, which leads to much stronger downpours. And I also want to acknowledge that many of you will have family in Shenzhen or Hong Kong who have been also very badly affected by the floods and the rains that have occurred there just in the last 24 to 48 hours. The scenes that we're seeing that we're most able to see from Hong Kong are absolutely horrendous, and the damage to lives and property is obviously very severe. This brings me to the first priority that the Green Party has for our next term of Parliament, and it is something that we are constantly have constantly stood for, which is around action on climate change. There are a couple of priorities that we've got around this, and the thing that I wanted to emphasise is that whilst climate change is effectively an economic problem that has led to social and environmental outcomes and consequences, we have to acknowledge that all of the solutions to climate change are things that can make our lives and our livelihoods better. They can both make sure that our towns and our cities are more resilient and that our homes are more resilient to the effects of those floods and fires and droughts and storms, but also we can lower household costs and improve living standards at the same time. So we have said in the next term of Parliament that we do want to ensure that our towns and cities are more resilient and safe from those rising seas and from those increased flood events that we experienced earlier this year and that we can expect to experience again in the future. We've said that we want to extend a clean power payment to people who want to renovate their homes, whether that's to put in home insulation or double glazing or to put rooftop solar on your roofs, which will also help to reduce your household energy bills, which we know are very difficult for some people to meet at the moment. We also, in fact, I've just come from an announcement at lunchtime today about protecting our oceans. And that is also part of the solution to climate change as well. Whilst we have strip mined the sea of fish in order to feed ourselves, what we know is that the oceans soak up an enormous amount of heat and act as a store for carbon dioxide. And so that is also a priority for us in the next term of Parliament as well. But I also know, and I do want to acknowledge, that there are many people who are really facing very difficult times at the moment as a result of higher costs and inflation. I do have issue with some of the things that have been said about the reasons for that. The government did spend a lot of money over the course of the last few years keeping people safe and keeping people in their jobs. If we had not done that, then tens of thousands of people would have died from the COVID virus, and we would have had mass unemployment. And so that did mean that there was an enormous response to ensure that people stayed in their jobs and that we kept them safe. Now, whatever the causes of that, we do know that we still have to deal with the consequences of that now, because the result of that is higher inflation right now. And so we do have a real emphasis in this election campaign on both living your incomes and also ensuring that we can cut some of your household costs, the things that really bite you in the hip pocket. So we have said that we will have a pledge for the people who rent in this country, which is about half of our population, who have faced rising rents over the course of many, many years. We have said that we will offer free dental and to set up a public dental service, because our teeth, for some reason, are the only part of our body that we ask how much you earn before we treat you, whereas everything else is taken care of through the public health system. We have said that we will ensure that we have an income guarantee for all New Zealanders, and that a significant portion of that is that the first $10,000 that you earn will be tax-free. That would ensure that 95% of all New Zealanders will actually see their income tax go down under a government that includes the Greens. We also want to ensure that people who currently slip through the cracks in our income support system are also elevated and looked after. And we know that we can do that because it is also possible for us to have a fairer tax system than the one that we do at the moment. The wealthiest New Zealanders in this country pay less than half the effective tax rate of the average New Zealander. So someone who is a nurse or a teacher pays twice as much tax as a proportion of their income as the wealthiest New Zealanders. This is unusual in that there are many countries in the world that have a much fairer tax system and are thus able to get the resources that they need in order to support people in their time of need. So that is an important emphasis that we have at this election campaign, and we think that it does distinguish us from other parties here present. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge, we've got 3 of our candidates in the room as well. I'd like to acknowledge Huhana Linden, who is standing in Te Tai Tokoro, Pete Sykes, who is standing in Mangere, and Lawrence Shunan, who is standing in Epsom. And Lawrence is our only Chinese-speaking candidate in the Green Party list. As a smaller party, it has taken us some time to build up the level of diversity and to ensure that we have people from all communities here, and we're very, very pleased to have Lawrence on our list at number 16. Which puts him right on the verge of getting into Parliament. So if enough of you give your party vote to the Green Party, it does mean that we will have Lawrence in Parliament with us as well. So I would invite you to ensure that all parties have Chinese members of Parliament, and to ensure that we can have Lawrence in our stable as well. So in conclusion, our emphasis in this election campaign and for the next term of Parliament is to lift incomes, is to cut your household costs, and to do those things in a way that also supports the solutions to climate change and looking after nature, and to creating a more healthy environment. Because the solutions that we have to climate change, the solutions we have to looking after our natural environment that we depend on for all life on this planet, those solutions can actually also help to cut costs and to lift living standards and to create better towns and cities. In other words, if there wasn't a climate crisis and if there wasn't a crisis in our natural environment, you'd probably want to do it anyway. And so I would say that the time is now for a larger green group in Parliament and more Green ministers sitting around the next cabinet table. And so I also invite you at this election to give your party vote to the Green Party. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, sia.
Thank you, James, and thank you for sharing your insights. And yes, we do acknowledge the resilience of New Zealanders during the Auckland floods and Cyclone Gabrielle. Okay, we're up to the second part of our forum, which is the moderator questions. So there are 8 specific questions, which each leader will have 2 minutes to address. We've got a roving mic, so I'll alternate between left and right and left, etc. Is it 1 minute, is it? Okay, 1 minute. Thanks, Catherine. All right, so we've discussed the cost of living for the average household having increased over 8% over the 12 months to June 2023. We've talked about food prices increasing by over 13% for the average household. If you were elected on October the 14th, what are the key policies and actions you and your party will undertake to hold and manage the cost of living crisis? And I'll pass that question over firstly to David Seymour.
Well, thank you. The number one concern people have is that prices are rising and working harder, but they're not getting more. What would we do about that? If you understand the problem, you run as fast as you can in the opposite direction to solve it. The problem is the government is wasting too much money, and when the government spends money but doesn't produce anything, that means there's more money out there but there's less to buy, and that's the definition of inflation. We've got to cut the amount on government waste, and as I mentioned, cut taxes so the average person is $2,000 a year better off by paying less tax. Then we've got to look at the red tape and regulation. That means people in business spend more time trying to comply with the rules and less time producing useful goods and services. We like to think of ourselves as a country with get up and go, where people do useful stuff to provide for themselves and their family. The truth is we spend too much time, too much money following completely pointless rules that actually cut red tape and regulation, along with government waste and new taxes.
Thank you, David. Jane Shaw, your policies.
Well, food prices are high in part because we've lost a lot of farmland to floods and droughts, and so that does have an upward pressure on food costs. So the solution to fixing climate change will also help to ensure more security in our supply chains and in our food supplies. Having said that, I very strongly believe that we need much more competition in the supermarket sector, because the fact that we only have really two main outlets does mean that they're able to drive our costs higher than they otherwise need to be. And our farmers get quite a bad deal out of them. I have already talked about helping to reduce your household costs by our clean power payment. Solar power has come down 89% over the course of the last few years. The more roofs that we can get household solar on, the more renewable energy we can have, but also what that means is that the portion of your disposable income that goes on power will also go down. So the more solar we have, the cheaper your household costs.
Thank you, James. Christopher.
Well, look, there's 5 things we've got to do to reduce inflation and reduce the cost of living. We've got to stop passing costs on to businesses and farmers and landlords. That's leading to higher prices and more inflation. We need to make sure we free up the blockages in the economy, which means you get our immigration system set up right, and importantly, make sure we get rid of the red tape and all the compliance that the government's throwing at businesses. We need to go through all the wasteful spending, $137 billion worth of spending, line item by line item. Stop the dumb and wasteful and stupid stuff. We need to give you tax relief. That's what we announced last week, because working people just cannot get ahead. They pay their taxes, get their kids to school, work incredibly hard, take 2 jobs and still go backwards. So we've got to make sure they get more money in their own pocket, spend it and save it as they see fit. And we need to make sure this Reserve Bank is focused on one goal, which is get inflation back to 3%. If we get inflation down, we bring interest rates down, we get our economy out of recession, we're the only one in one at the moment, and then we actually keep people in employment. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Is this working? It's working. It's working now. We'll start the timer now. Kia ora koutou. The cost of living challenges are probably the biggest challenge facing New Zealanders right now. The work to address it doesn't start after the election. We as a government have been working hard on those bread and butter issues that matter to New Zealanders. On the 1st of April, we saw superannuation, student allowances, benefits, the minimum wage go up. All of that extra money going to people's pockets will make a difference. Some of the changes that we've introduced also make a difference to the budgets of households. Things like cheaper or free public transport, free food in schools, dairy products in schools, a range of other things. That helps families with their budgets and how they pay for other things. But also going into the election, we've been really clear. Food costs are high. We say GST or fruit and vegetables. We say more money through working for families, and we also say that we need to move towards a place where we can have universal dental care starting with under 30s. So those are some of our commitments.
Thank you, Carmen. Our second question, 886 ram raids in year 2022, 1 every 10 hours. Crime and disorder has been rampant over the past 3 years. As party leader, what are your policies to control and contain this level and ensure all New Zealanders are safe and secure in their communities? Chris.
Yeah, look, I mean, crime is out of control because we've had a government that's been soft on crime and sends a message from the top that you can get away with it and is on the side of offenders, not on the side of victims. What are we going to do? We're going to make sure we back our police, we tackle the gangs, because they're not nice people. They want all the rights of being New Zealanders, but they're not prepared to take the responsibilities. Ban gang patches in public places, give police dispersal and non-consulting powers, make sure they can do warrantless search powers under firearm prohibition orders, and importantly, make being a gang member an aggravating factor in sentencing. We're going to have serious consequences for serious young offenders. That means we will have our boot camps with community organisations working with those young people so we can turn their lives around, make powerful targeted interventions. And we need to make sure that we've got serious consequences and serious sentencing. That means limiting the amount of discounts that judges can give into sentences so that actually we get sentences that actually fit the seriousness of the crime. Someone who should be on 3 years in jail, not 5 months on home detention, that has to stop. That is unacceptable in New Zealand.
We all take this issue incredibly seriously, and of course front of mind are our retailers and our businesses that have been impacted by things like ram raids. What we do need to keep in mind is some of the people that have been committing these crimes are incredibly young, and so when we hear from some political parties that they need to be locked up, it actually doesn't make sense, nor would it be the right thing to do. What we have seen is actually the success of the wraparound support that we have put in place for many of the young offenders in places like South Auckland, where we have been able to put in the full wraparound supports for those young people and their families. We've actually seen an 88% reduction in re-offending for those young people in places like South Auckland. In the last 6 months, we've actually seen a 65% decline in ram raids, and that's because we've been focused on those young people and their families and getting to the core of the issues that they are facing. Lock them up and throw away the key actually isn't the answer. Finally, I will say 1,800 more police officers we have invested in and an additional 300 to come.
Yeah, look, I hear Labor say that they're taking crime seriously. That's not the problem. The problem is criminals don't take Labor seriously. That's why they are the That's why we say that 17-year-olds should be back in the adult court system, because treating them like kids, as if they act like kids, that experiment has failed. We say that there should be a youth wing of corrections, and that's not locking them up and throwing away the key. It's saying that there needs to be a place where youth offenders can end up that they don't want to go, where they will be rehabilitated. But right now, they believe that they get a free pass and they just keep on offending. That's why they don't take Labor seriously. We need to increase the prison capacity and send a message to the judges that they need to take into account the victim and the community safety more than they do now. Because right now, it's all about the offender. You read these stories about terrible things, all about the offender. We're going to start focusing on the victim and their rights and the offender and their consequences.
Some of you will have read a story in the newspaper today about how when prisoners come out of prison, if they don't have stable housing, then they are 5 times more likely to commit another crime than if they do have stable housing. We really do need to look at why it is we have, what are the drivers of crime? And it is social exclusion, and it is extreme intergenerational poverty. And if we fail to address those things, we will continue to see rising crime in this country. It's one of the things that I get most depressed about every election is that the lock them up, kind of throw away the key type policies that we hear, whilst they might have some emotional pull, take young people and turn them into hardened, lifelong criminals where they re-offend, go back into prison, learn more about how to commit more crime, come out, and then do more crime. We really need to kind of get at the underlying reasons and the really complex reasons for why it is people commit crime in the first place. Just locking up everybody who commits a crime just turns them into criminals.
Thank you. Question 3. The healthcare system is under strain with hospitals in need of upgrading and a shortage of skilled doctors and nurses. What policies and actions will you introduce to support our frail health system? I ask that of Chris.
Look, there's three things we've got to do in healthcare because we have a crisis and we can't access healthcare when we desperately need it. The first is that the government has spent all the money actually merging these district health boards, putting them into one big mega bureaucracy, and as a result we've got to get the money out of the bureaucracy and we've got to send it to the front line. The second thing is we need to develop and build our own workforce, and that means opening up a third medical school at the University of Waikato, and it means expanding the places available at the Auckland and Otago universities. Why? We have 360 Kiwi kids studying medicine in Australia because they couldn't get into medical schools here in New Zealand. So we can get 220 more doctors trained each and every year. That's a good thing in addition to what we do today. We're going to bond our nurses. If you want to stay in New Zealand and contribute to the public or private healthcare system, and you stay for 5 years, we'll take $22,500 off your student loan as an incentive to be able to retain our great nurses and midwives. And then the last thing we need is we need to reinstate healthcare targets because every single healthcare outcome has gone backwards, and that's what we've announced today. Thank you.
But I just want to say that when we got into government, we inherited a health system that had been significantly underinvested in for 9 years. The hospital out this way, Middlemore Hospital, had sewage running through the walls because of the lack of investment. And so that is the level of challenge that we inherited. I'm very proud of the fact that we have invested funding into Pharmac, so medications, by over 50% since we got into government. We've nearly increased the funding by 50% to help the health system overall. When we got into government, our doctors, our nurses in particular, had barely received pay increases under the 9 years of a national government. We have significantly lifted the terms and conditions, including pay, for our nurses in particular. If we want to make it a more attractive place to work, then we need to make sure that we pay well, and Labor has been committed to doing that. There is a lot more to do with the health system, but what we can't have is that progress stopped, and Labor is committed to continuing.
I think we need a government that will take responsibility for health, not blame some other government that was in power 6 years ago. Thank you, but that was 10 seconds of my minute. I defy anyone to deal with this, but let me try and give you 3 quick ideas. Number one, New Zealand needs to get richer. Australians earn 40% more. They pay the same tax rate as a percentage. That means they've got more money for drugs, for doctors, for nurses. We need to make New Zealand a richer country, otherwise this problem will get worse. Number 2, we've got to stop being so hostile to immigrant workers. We make it hard for people to get through the border. We make it hard for them to get registered as nurses and doctors and dentists. We're not a country that can afford to turn talented people away. ACT has several policies that would help with that. And finally, I take a leaf out of the book of Deng Xiaoping. He said, it doesn't matter if the cat is black or white, so long as it catches mice. And we need to stop the war on any kind of private healthcare and say, if you get it done cheap and fast, it doesn't matter if it's public or private. Thank you.
I just point out that Australia has a capital gains tax and a stamp duty, neither of which you pay here in New Zealand as well, and that is one of the reasons why they have more resources to be able to spend on their healthcare system.
They've got snakes too, maybe we should get those.
So at this election, the Green Party is prioritising your dental care because that is essentially a system that is almost entirely privatised at the moment. And it means that we have some of the worst outcomes in the entire developed world as a result. It costs an enormous amount for people to be able to access dental care. And not does that only mean that people are experiencing toothache and losing teeth and so on unnecessarily, but it also leads to other problems like heart disease and diabetes, which have an enormous cost on the health system as well. And so by bringing dental into the public healthcare system, you actually help to reduce other costs also in the public healthcare system. So that is the focus that we want to see in the next government.
Thanks, James. The average house price in New Zealand is currently $891,000. The price of housing is still extremely high. What initiatives will you put in place to support first-time buyers and make housing more affordable for ordinary New Zealanders? David Seymour.
Well, I'm a trained electrical engineer, so I take a practical approach. How do we get more houses built? The only solution to a shortage of houses is build more houses. It's not tax people more, it's not give some people a grant, it's not ban foreigners, it's not gang up on people with Chinese sounding names as the Labour Party once did. It is to build more houses. And how do we do that? We fund infrastructure by sharing half the GST on construction with the local council so they can afford the pipes and the connection. We change the Resource Management Act so you can actually develop property that you own so long as you are not interfering with your neighbours. And then we let people with innovative building techniques and materials step through the council inspections. That gave us leaky buildings and bring in better, faster, cheaper, warmer and more affordable ways of building homes without the current bureaucracy that the council's foist on people. If we do that, that's an engineer's solution. It's about building more houses. It's not about trying to change who misses out on a fundamental shortage of houses.
James Shaw.
I agree with Dave on one thing. We do need more houses. One of the things that we have said that we want to see is 35,000 houses built over the course of the next 5 years by Kaingaora, the Housing New Zealand. Currently, we're building just under 5,000 houses a year, so if we increase that to 7,000 houses a year, we'll be able to clear the public waiting list. That will take huge pressure off the private rental market and ensure that there are more homes available for rentals and for first-home buyers. We also want to see Kaingaora offer 10-year construction contracts. At the moment, it's very, very short-term, and that means that the construction centre itself goes through these boom and bust cycles. If they can have long-term contracts over 10 years, it means that they'll be able to build up their workforces, build up their supply chains, and that can also carry us through a downturn during the construction, during any kind of recession that we have. And the third thing that we want to, I'll get back to that in a minute.
Chris.
Look, we live in a country the size of Great Britain and Japan, and yet we have much more expensive houses and a lot less people. Our major problem is supply. We need to be able to build more houses. That we want every council and town across New Zealand to tomorrow go out and rezone 30 years of housing growth. We want to be able to use innovative funding and financing tools like value capture and targeted rates in order to get the developments built. We need to make sure that we incentivise councils so they participate in that growth, and that means $25,000 for every consent over the last 5-year average. That gets us building more houses in the city. The second thing we've got to do is free up and improve our rental market, and that means unwinding the bright line test from 10 years back to 2 years. It means unwinding interest deductibility and making sure we get a balance right between the tenancy laws as a landlord, so we encourage landlords to put more houses into the rental market so that people don't end up on a state house wait list or worse in emergency housing. And then with respect to state housing and social housing, we need to independently review Kaingaora, a poorly performing organisation, and we also need to power up our community housing providers as well.
Interesting, much of what is being proposed by National is
similar to what they were doing last time they were in government, which didn't work, which led to the housing crisis. Some of us have long memories and can remember these debates back in 2017. I'm very proud of Labour's track record. You just need to drive around any Auckland street and you can see the housing that's underway. Sometimes contentious in neighbourhoods, but we need those houses, so it's so important that they are being built. We are building more state houses or public housing than any government since the 1950s. We have more measures, thank you, we have more measures in place to protect renters, which we think is actually really important. Our homes are warmer and healthier now because of the regulations that we put in place as a government, so our kids aren't getting as sick, which was really important. And I think we've had 72,000 people take up the first home owners scheme opportunity that we introduced. We're going to commit to continuing to build houses, and I think over the last 6 years we've built up a track record for building them.
Thank you all. Question 5. The economy is following the global trend and suffering from recessionary impacts. The dairy industry is struggling with lower farm product prices. What macro policies will you introduce to support all economic business sectors? Chris.
Well, let's be clear, New Zealand's economic performance is not following global impacts. Australia is actually growing their economy, they have a fiscal surplus, and they don't have a current account deficit like we have. We are the only country in the Asia-Pacific region in an economic recession. So what do we need to do? We need to actually build out a world-class education system. We need to make sure that we invest in modern, reliable infrastructure. We need to make sure that we embrace skills, technology and innovation. We free up our businesses from red tape and cost and compliance so they can actually grow, and we make sure we have stronger international connections to the world so we can sell great New Zealand products and services to 8 billion people out there in 195 countries. That's what we need to make sure that New Zealand becomes more prosperous. That's what we need to do to make sure that New Zealand becomes one of the leading, small, advanced countries on planet Earth.
I think it's important to mention that the economy is better placed now than what it was pre-COVID. So despite some immense challenges, New Zealand, in the face of those challenges, have done comparatively well. I notice that the opposition continues to compare us to Australia, but if we look at our achievements, so record low unemployment, we have inflation going in the right direction in terms of that decline, and it's forecast to go down. Exports are up and doing well. Under this government, we've secured free trade agreements with Europe and the UK, and we've upgraded the trade agreement with China. I believe something like 75% of our exports are tied into those trade agreements. This government is very much focused on the economy, but we recognise also that the economy is at risk if we don't invest and focus on the health and the social well-being of New Zealanders as well.
Look, I just don't think for a moment that we can say the economy is in a better space than it was before COVID. We've got $100 billion of extra debt, we've got inflation out of control, we're the only country in the Asia-Pacific rim that's going into recession. If that is doing well, I would hate to see Labor try and screw the economy up. We have real challenges here, and they're going to be made worse by the fact that things have been going wrong while our terms of trade, the price of things we sell compared with the price of things we buy, have actually been good, and with milk going down and the Chinese economy in trouble, they're going to get worse. So what are we going to do about it? Well, it comes back to the basics. Reduce the red tape and regulation so people spend more time producing and less time complying. More investment in producing more, less money spent following the government's rules. Less government waste, lower taxes, and more open connection with the world. You know, for 20 years, this country was connected with the rest of the world. We put up far too many walls, and there's no future in that. Thank you.
There's really 3 areas of focus to growing the economy and building up our productivity. It comes down to investment, innovation and infrastructure. And in all 3 of those areas there are blockages and barriers. One of the things I said in my opening remarks is that the solutions to climate change are also the solutions to building a better life for our communities. And in all of those areas where you're talking about investment in renewable energy, if you're talking about infrastructure like public transport, if you're talking about innovation like some of the sort of satellite Rocket Lab and some of those emerging industries that are focused on actually observing what's going on with our climate and with our environment, I have to say that this is the opportunity in at least a generation to build a high-value, highly productive, zero-carbon, innovative, highly investable economy. And so to me, bringing together the greatest challenges of our generation is also the greatest opportunity that we have for the economy.
Thank you. Question 6. The devastating effects of global warming can be seen worldwide and here in New Zealand. What are your workable policies on climate change and reducing emissions. David Seymour.
Right, well, first of all, I think we need to recognise the challenge New Zealand faces. We cannot afford to do nothing about climate change. We'll be made a pariah, people will put up barriers to our export, so we must have an effective climate change policy. But also, we cannot afford to put New Zealand farmers and New Zealand businesses out of business so we can be poorer here in New Zealand and our customers go and get their milk and whatever other products they're buying from our competitors offshore who actually emit even more, because that would be a way to shoot ourselves in both feet. So we've got to keep between that floor and that ceiling. That's what I talk about, sensible reduction in emission. And we say New Zealand should attach its emissions trading scheme cap to our top 5 trading partners average, and then you know every year how much there's going to be a reduction based on where the rest of the world is going. And the revenue from the emissions trading scheme will give it back to you. If it's $1 billion of ETS revenue, everybody here gets $200, so people are committed long term to climate action. Thank you.
I'm very proud to have been the Climate Change Minister in the government over the last 6 years, where we have seen more action on climate change than the last 30 years of governments combined. Finally, in this country, our emissions, the total amount of pollution that we're putting into the atmosphere, is actually starting to come down year on year. And that has taken an enormous amount of effort to start to build that momentum, to that smart green economy that works for everybody. But we do need to ensure not only do we bring down our emissions, but also that we actually adapt to the effects of climate change that are already starting to affect our communities, such as the floods here in Auckland earlier this year, and Cyclone Gabrielle just a couple of weeks later, and that we can see around the world. So designing our towns and our cities and our homes and our buildings so that they are resilient to those effects, whether it's floods or storms or fires or droughts, that has to be a huge priority for this country. And that also means not just more resilient, but also nicer places to live, easier to get around, and lower costs for everybody.
Look, we want to deliver on our net zero 2050 goals. There's 2 ways that we've got to do it. One is we have to invest in the emissions trading system and make sure that it's functioning well, so that actually, our polluters are incented to actually change their behaviour. Importantly, we want to give you a climate dividend from those funds so that you're invested in making sure climate action continues to happen. And then we've got to say, what can government uniquely do in society to actually accelerate that? And that means making sure that we actually have faster resource consenting for renewable energy projects so we can double the amount of cheap, abundant, renewable electricity. It means making sure that we can build out, like we did with ultra-fast broadband and EV charging networks, so that people want to adopt electric vehicles faster. And we need to make sure we've got a sensible pathway on agricultural emissions. Give our farmers the tools and technologies around biotechnology to deal with it first, then let them get the credit for all the good stuff that they're doing, and then only then introduce agricultural pricing emissions by 2030.
I think that the recent weather events have really woken New Zealanders up, actually. For those that were sceptical about climate change and the impacts that it might have on New Zealand and subsequently our economy, the recent weather events have really reminded people that climate change is real and that we must act. I do want to acknowledge James again. We are seeing a decline in our emissions because of the government's efforts, and I want to acknowledge James's support for those efforts as the Minister. I will say that I'm very disappointed to hear that there are some opposition parties that are looking to get rid of successful schemes like the Clean Car Discount. Those are the types of initiatives that actually make a difference with regards to reducing our emissions. And it becomes very difficult to see political parties as credible when they stand up in public spaces and say that they will be getting rid of those very successful schemes. We remain committed to reducing our carbon emissions and to meeting the targets that we have signed up to internationally.
Thank you. Question 7. Co-governance is an emerging and developing model of decision-making in New Zealand. The term refers to a shared governance arrangement with representatives on the iwi on one side and representatives of central and local government on the other. each side having equal voting rights at the decision-making table. What is your party's stance on co-governance? Christopher Luxon.
Look, we believe that we are one country, that we're all New Zealanders, that we deliver public services and make them available to all New Zealanders equally on the basis of their needs, not their ethnicity, and that under the Treaty Article 3 that we're all equal, that we have equal protection and equal citizenship, and it's one person, one vote. And that's why we do not support co-governance of public services.
My father migrated here from the Pacific, and growing up, we developed a very strong sense of respect for tangata whenua, the indigenous people of this space. And over the years, I've learned that actually, if Māori are not at the table, then often mistakes are made with regards to decision making. Co-governance is not new. It happened under previous national governments, and so it's very disappointing that we're seeing this level of race baiting where Māori are being put out there in a way that is not unifying for New Zealand as a country. And I want to be a unified New Zealand. An example of where we have co-governance, and it seems to have escaped everyone's sight, is actually with our regional skills leadership groups. We have a delegated representative from iwi alongside the other co-lead, leading industry and business leaders and other stakeholders to determine and give advice on what kind of skills and training we need to have the right skills and capabilities in those regions to take up the jobs. It works and nobody is hurt by it.
It is actually a complex topic to go through in 1 minute, but let me just try to give 2 examples of where co-governance can be good and can work, and where it doesn't. Auckland's volcanic homes were part of a treaty settlement where many different hapu, many Māori groups from across the Auckland region had an interest in claiming back what had been their ancestors' property. Many Aucklanders who are non-Māori also like to use the combs for walks and so on. And setting up the Tupuna Maunga Authority to share the governance and ownership of those combs was a sensible solution brought about by Chris Finlayson. We agree with that. On the other hand, Three Waters infrastructure, dams, pumps, treatment plants, all of that was created by democratically elected councils in a democratic society after the Treaty of Waitangi, and those Three Waters assets and other public assets for that matter should be managed one person, one vote, where each person has the same rights and duties as the treaty said. And Carmel said no one is hurt by discrimination. Everybody is hurt when we stop treating each other as human beings with the same basic dignity and rights and duties.
They are hurt by real discrimination. They are hurt by real discrimination, David Senior.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, I mean, the last national government actually did a huge amount of co-governance work, and I'm curious about what's changed in the last 6 years that's caused them to change their mind on that. There is no one in local government or in central government where you have more than one vote, unless you're a multiple property owner. Only multiple property owners get more than one vote at local government elections, because you get to cast votes essentially for every house that you have if you have houses in multiple locations around the country. Māori are on the Māori who want to be on the Māori roll can be on the Māori roll. They get one vote there. If they don't want to be on the Māori roll and just want to be on the general vote, then you get one vote there. So you don't get multiple votes. So this idea that we are one person, one vote, that holds true. It's true. No one's changed that anywhere, and it's a lie to say that actually the notion of one person, one vote is on in this country. It has not. And so I have no problem with the notion that we include the Indigenous people of this country under the treaty that we signed with them when we founded this country in the governance of this country.
Okay, thank you. The final question of the moderator. Of the 64,000 or so students who left school in 2022, only half attained NCA Level 3 or above. A quarter of them left without NCA Level 2, considered the minimum level needed to pursue work or further study. while 15% failed to even reach NCA Level 1. The state of education in New Zealand is not good. What can be done? David Seymour.
If I've done anything I'm particularly proud of in my time in politics, it's charter schools. We let communities set up their own schools on a simple deal. The kids have to show up and we'll check their attendance and pay based on the kids showing up. The kids have to be taught a solid curriculum and we will pay the school based on the kids succeeding and achieving. And you, as an operator, as an educator, are the most important profession in the future of this country. We will let you run your school your way because you know more about how to connect with kids in your community than anybody sitting in the ever-expanding Wellington bureaucracy they call the Ministry of Education. That is the principle that we need to apply. For $20 billion of taxpayer money going into education, we want to know who's showing up. They don't even know that right now. We want to know every day. We want a knowledge-rich curriculum of valuable information that is taught and tested, and then we treat the profession with respect and let them be in charge of their schools.
There's an economics think tank called the New Zealand Initiative that did a fantastic piece of research a few years ago in which they looked at what causes kids to succeed or fail in their schooling. And they looked at private schools and they looked at public schools all over the country. And the thing that they found made the single biggest difference was whether the school was located in an area of social and economic deprivation or in a wealthier area or somewhere in between. To an enormous extent, that was the thing that drove the success of kids in school. And they found that there were some really great private schools and there were some really bad private schools. And there were some really great public schools and some really bad public schools. And ultimately it didn't matter whether those schools were in the public system or in the private system. What mattered was the background that the kids came from. So when we talk about, when I spoke before about crime, the things that, lead to, cause crime, having access to decent housing, having decent incomes, having an inclusive society, those are the things that help to ensure that kids actually have a decent education to succeed in life.
Well, listen, I just want to say I agree with David and I commend him and congratulate him for the work that he did advocating for charter schools in the last National Act government. What we're going to do is make sure we teach an hour of maths, an hour of reading, an hour of writing each and every day to every primary and intermediate school age student. We're going to define the curriculum so it's really clear what we teach, when, who and how and each individual year. Turns out it actually is quite a good idea if we've got a science curriculum to use the words like physics and biology and chemistry, which we don't currently do at the moment. So we've got robust, good curriculum, and we need to make sure that we are monitoring the progress of our kids every 6 months. So if they need extra help, we don't wait till they're 15 years old to find out they failed a basic maths, reading and writing test. We get them the help earlier. If they need more extension, we give them more extension as well. So back to basics, teach the basics brilliantly, teach structured literacy, which is great evidence for helping kids learn to read, and make sure that we do our job really well.
I previously have been a primary
school teacher and also worked in the tertiary sector and am a mum. And so I just want to say that I'm very clear about where my own child is at with regards to their literacy, maths, reading, writing, because it's very clear in the reports as it stands. I'm proud of the curriculum that we have. It is an outstanding curriculum, and we have excellent teachers in our schools. We believe in a strong public education system. We don't support setting up a few private to be supported on, otherwise it's very difficult for them to achieve at school. So we need to be doing all of that, Martin.
That's how you guarantee to change the government and get a strong stable government on the other side. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
If your party votes for the Green Party, the greater chance that Lawrence will have a better